What's good, family? Welcome back to another video. Now we have this video right here. It seems as if Jaguar Wright is named in a seriously disturbing lawsuit. Now what does this mean? Because we know all of last year and the year before, Jaguar Wright has been exposing the industry, the people within it, the darkness that goes on, and the heinous acts that Hollywood does. But now it could be a possibility that she could be just as bad as the people that she's been exposing. I don't know, you know what I'm saying? So we're about to watch this video right here by The Truth Is. If you want to check out his channel, you can do so you can watch his videos. But we're going to get into this video right here. He's going to be reading the lawsuit. It's 48 minutes long. We just want to really get to the point and see and hear what's described in this lawsuit, who wrote it, how credible really are they, and get to the bottom of this. You feel what I'm saying? So without further ado, smash the like button, subscribe, turn on post notifications, and let's see what's going on.
Little by little, we are finding out exactly who Diddy's accomplices are. Everyone who loved to party with him is now acting like they don't know him, pretending like they were never involved in the evil that was going on at his parties. Thankfully, the victims are speaking out and aren't sparing anyone. At the end of last year, it was Jay-Z that was called out. Today, it's the NFL star Odell Beckham Jr., the internet comedian Drewski, and Jaguar Wright. All are being accused of some disturbing allegations that paint them as some of the worst Diddy accomplices yet. Hey guys, I hope all is well. Welcome back to The Truth Is, where I drop new videos every other day exposing the truth. In today's episode, we will be talking about the newly updated lawsuit made against Drewski, Odell Beckham Jr., and Jaguar Wright. I just wanted to politely ask you guys to like, comment, subscribe, and share this video so we can get it seen by as many people as possible. For over a year now, they have been suppressing my content for exposing the truth. But with your help, we can trick the algorithm to hopefully push this video, as this is need to know information. I want to thank you all. Now, let's get right into it. Right when it seems the Diddy drama...
I smashed the like button. And honestly, I'm not surprised about Odell Beckham. I've already seen the video of him and Justin Bieber in the club doing some questionable things. Drewski, he made an entire commercial with Diddy in it. I mean, if Diddy invites you over to his house or one of his parties, what do you gotta say?
You gotta tell him no. You got to tell him no.
You gotta tell him no. But now, Jaguar Wright. Let's see what's going on.
Is dying out. More news comes out that makes you remember how much of a monster all these celebrities are. We are finding out exactly why all those seen around Diddy have stayed quiet after the allegations were made on him. They are quietly, desperately hoping they get away with their crimes. Thankfully, we are finally seeing names other than Diddy being mentioned. In my opinion, I believe that all who were at Diddy's parties are likely guilty, but we still need proof and evidence in order to make sure these people are really guilty. That's exactly what has come out about two massive celebrities and Jaguar Wright. Just yesterday, 3 more Diddy accomplices were named in a newly updated lawsuit. According to victim Ashley Parham, she was R-worded by Diddy and several others. The lawsuit claims the incident happened in 2018 after she called out Diddy for the death of
This is Odell Beckham Jr. named in Diddy lawsuit for alleged R in East. This is alleged Diddy lawsuit accuses Jaguar Wright of aiding in
The lawsuit alleges that Diddy heard the allegations and got his revenge a month later, as she was sedated, kidnapped, and R-worded by Diddy and his accomplices. The lawsuit was amended, and the names of the accomplices were just added, and it's not looking good for those accused. According to the lawsuit, both Drewski and Odell Beckham Jr. allegedly joined in the R-wording, while the lawsuit claims that Jaguar Wright, the woman who has claimed to be exposing Diddy and Jay-Z all over the internet, allegedly helped traffic this woman. I have found the full lawsuit, so let's read it together. Plaintiff met defendant Shane in February 2018 after an altercation with another man at a bar, and defendant Shane came to plaintiff's rescue. While outside the bar with friends and other patrons, defendant Shane FaceTime video called defendant Diddy and was showing people defendant Diddy in the video on his phone, attempting to impress the people with his famous friend. Defendant Shane then showed plaintiff defendant Diddy on his video call, which plaintiff ignored, stating she was not impressed by him knowing defendant Diddy because she believed defendant Diddy had something to do with the death of rapper Tupac Shakur. Visible in the FaceTime call was defendant Diddy and some of his children, including his son Christian and Quincy. It appeared from the plaintiff's perspective, defendant Diddy was having a get-together at his home during the time of the FaceTime call with defendant Shane. Defendant Diddy heard plaintiff's statement and made a remark that plaintiff would pay for her statement regarding Tupac and overall dismissal of defendant Diddy. On March 23, 2018, defendant Shane invited plaintiff over to his home to assist him with his cancer medications because he stated he was weak and unable to open his medication.
I'm about to look up what plaintiff means so we all have a good understanding.
Upon plaintiff's arrival, defendant Shane informed plaintiff that he wanted to give her a ride in his new car. Plaintiff and defendant Shane left his residence for a brief period and then returned. Once they returned, defendant Shane left the door.
Okay. So the plaintiff is the person who brings a case against another in court. So the plaintiff is the person that actually even filed the lawsuit.
His apartment partially open and stated that the door was ajar because there was an issue with the door where it couldn't close completely. Defendant Shane was renting an apartment on the lower floor of a home in Ordina, California. Defendant Shane had a separate entrance into his residence that led to the backyard of his home. The home also had a main entrance on Loma Vista Drive. Defendant Shane rented the home from a woman who lived in the upstairs portion of the home and had 2 dogs who resided with her. Plaintiff and defendant Shane then began to watch a movie, and defendant Shane offered her a glass of water, which he retrieved and brought back to plaintiff. Approximately 10 minutes after plaintiff and defendant Shane returned from their drive, defendant Diddy entered defendant Shane's residence. Defendant Diddy entered the home in a grand ready-to-party manner. His grandiose entrance was so loud that the dogs upstairs began barking. Defendant Diddy did not enter the home through the backyard entrance, but instead through the main entrance. Along with defendant Diddy were his bodyguards, defendant Big Homie CC and defendant KK, defendant Brandy and defendant Doe 2, who upon information and belief is a friend of defendant Shane and Diddy, and defendant Diddy's driver Doe 3, who remained outside in his vehicle during the duration of plaintiff's assault. Plaintiff believes defendant Shane invited her over to set her up to be assaulted by defendant Diddy because of the statements she made about defendant Diddy a month prior. Upon defendant Diddy's arrival, he immediately began to antagonize the plaintiff's statements about Tupac during the video call and that defendant Diddy called plaintiff. Plaintiff was in shock as she never believed that she would ever see or meet defendant Diddy in real life, let alone in the small apartment rented by defendant Shane. Defendant Diddy then began advancing towards where plaintiff was sitting on defendant Shane's bed with a knife and held it to the right side of plaintiff's face and threatened to give her a glass-cold smile. In retaliation for her previous statements on the video call, defendant KK told defendant Diddy that she did not think giving plaintiff a glass-cold smile would be advantageous to their potential clients who they can sell plaintiff to. Defendant KK then made a threat to plaintiff that they could ship her off anywhere in the world and that she would never see her family or anyone she knew ever again. Defendant Shane then partially undressed plaintiff, then defendant Diddy removed the remainder of her clothing, removing the knife from her face, and then retrieved a bottle of liquid from a large fanny pack. Defendant Diddy then squirted a bottle of liquid on plaintiff, which
This nigga Diddy and his damn baby oil, bro. This is insane.
placed her in fear that she was being squirted with chemical substances like acid. Plaintiff soon realized the substance was an oil lubricant. Plaintiff was squirted with this liquid substance over the entirety of her body. Defendant KK was then told by defendant Diddy to insert what looked like a syringe from a sterile packaging into plaintiff's private area. Defendant KK did as told while assisted by defendant Brandy, and then told defendant Diddy that they were unable to use the IUD because it had prematurely been released from its packaging. Defendant Diddy, upset by this, took the syringe from defendant KK and tried inserting it in her privates instead. Defendant KK and Diddy began to argue as defendant KK continued to advise defendant Diddy that since the IUD had been prematurely released from its packaging, it was no way that they could insert it into plaintiff's private area effectively. After some time, defendant Diddy heeded the advice of defendant KK and removed the syringe from plaintiff's private area and handed it to defendant KK. Defendant KK and defendant Brandy then exited defendant Shane's residence, leaving plaintiff alone with defendants Diddy, Shane, and John Doe's, who have been named herein. Defendant Diddy then picked up a television remote that was near plaintiff and violently inserted it into plaintiff's private area. Defendant Diddy, while violently R-wording plaintiff with a TV remote, told plaintiff that her life was in his hands and that if he wanted he could take her and she would never be seen again. Plaintiff began hysterically crying from the threats by defendant Diddy, along with the pain of being R-worded by defendant Diddy with a TV remote, as well as the lingering pain from the ordeal with the IUD syringe insertion. Defendant Diddy then instructed defendant Shane to turn plaintiff on her stomach, seemingly tired of hearing the plaintiff blood-curdling cries. Defendant Shane then grabbed plaintiff by her abdomen and hips and turned plaintiff on her stomach. Defendant Diddy then instructed defendant Shane to put a pillow over her head because he didn't want to hear her face or hear her cries, and instructed defendant Shane to R-word plaintiff. Defendant Shane did as he was told by defendant Diddy and began to R-word plaintiff. Defendant Diddy then violently R-worded plaintiff after defendant Shane. Defendant Doe too then joined defendant Diddy and Shane, taking turns R-wording plaintiff. Immediately after defendant Doe too R-worded plaintiff, he exited defendant Shane's residence. Defendant Diddy then instructed another defendant Doe to also R-word plaintiff. Defendant Doe has been determined to be defendant Drewski. Instead of immediately R-wording plaintiff, defendant Drewski doused plaintiff with more oil lubricant and then jumped on top of plaintiff's oiled body, treating it like a slip and slide, knocking the wind out of plaintiff due to his enormous size. Defendant Drewski then caught himself from sliding over plaintiff's oiled body and off the bed. He then began R-wording plaintiff. While defendant Drewski was R-wording plaintiff, defendant Diddy sat in a chair near the bed and began playing with little Diddy while recording plaintiff's R-word by defendant Drewski. Another party's phone fell on the bed near plaintiff's.
While recording plaintiff's R-word by defendant Diddy. So they're saying, according to this lawsuit, there's a film somewhere of Drewski doing what he had to do for the fame. Abiding by the demons. Now this is obviously allegedly. We need to see where this is taken. But this is a big one right here, bro. This is insane and wild. And the thing is, I really can't put it past them, bro. Like, I can't put it past them. There's a cost that comes to the fame and associating with a dude like this, bro. There's a cost to it.
Plaintiff then attempted to grab the phone, but it slipped out of her hand and onto the floor due to the oil lubricant that had been dosed all over her person by defendant Diddy and Drewski. Defendant Diddy began laughing at plaintiff's attempt to grab the phone. Throughout this violent gang R-word, defendant Diddy made constant belittling remarks to plaintiff, including that he owned her now. At some point during this ordeal, plaintiff remembers defendants referring to another defendant Doe as Cornelius and remember the name because it was odd and unique. Plaintiff has come to discover that defendant Doe Cornelius, who R-worded her, was defendant Odell Beckham Jr. Plaintiff's body was becoming more and more limp over the course of the violent R-word until eventually she had no control over her body, nor could she move her body. When defendant Drewski finished R-wording plaintiff, defendant KK entered the room to examine the condition of plaintiff, who was barely able to move or control her bodily functions. Defendant KK examined plaintiff to see if she needed assistance and was about to give plaintiff an IV fluid. Plaintiff cannot be certain if she did or did not receive it. Defendant KK then opened a different bag, different than the one defendant Diddy removed the oil from, where plaintiff observed several medicine bottles, one fluid bag, and other unidentifiable powder-like drugs. Defendant KK then removed the pill from one of the medicine bottles and gave it to defendant Diddy. Defendant Diddy then inserted the pill into plaintiff's mouth and down her throat to where the plaintiff had no choice but to ingest the unknown pill. Defendant Diddy, Shane, KK, Odell, and Drewski then exited the residence to the backyard where they smoked. Plaintiff remained in an almost lifeless state in defendant Shane's bathroom until she finally regained her bodily functions. Plaintiff then began looking for her clothes and her purse that contained her car keys and cell phone, but could not discover them in the room or anywhere in the apartment. Plaintiff was only able to find a t-shirt on the floor, which she put on to cover her body. Plaintiff also observed a black wrapper on the floor of the bedroom, which she assumed was used by one of the defendants, most likely defendant Diddy, during the R-word. Plaintiff then found a knife with the assistance of those plaintiff and headed to the backyard where the defendants were smoking, as that was the only way to exit the premises onto the street. Plaintiff concealed the knife on her left side as she exited the apartment to the backyard area. Upon coming to the exit of the home, which led to the backyard, plaintiff was met by defendant Big Homie CC, who was standing at the door between the residence and the backyard. By the time plaintiff was able to compose herself and come to the backyard, defendant KK was no longer in the backyard, but upstairs on the patio balcony with defendant Brandy. Defendant Doe allowed plaintiff to walk to the backyard where defendants were still smoking. Defendant Doe did not see the knife that plaintiff concealed on her left side, as it was obstructed by the oversized t-shirt plaintiff was wearing. Plaintiff observed defendant Diddy still partially undressed from the assault, while the other defendants had on their clothes. Defendant Shane then left to the upstairs portion of the patio balcony where defendants KK and Brandy were already situated. Plaintiff then sat down on a makeshift seat in the backyard when defendant Diddy noticed her presence and remarked that he was surprised she was able to walk because he had given her enough drugs to take out a horse. Plaintiff then asked defendant Diddy what he gave her, and he laughed and did not provide a response. Defendant Diddy then made further comments to plaintiff in a jovial, friendly manner, asking her why they hadn't partied together before because it was so much fun, and he hadn't had anything that tight in a while. Defendant Big Homie CC then quipped at defendant Diddy that he probably hadn't had anything that tight because he was not used to having it backdoor, which defendants Diddy and Doe laughed at. Plaintiff then told defendant Diddy she did not party with him and she did not enjoy partying with him and that he R-worded her. Defendant Diddy did not like plaintiff's response to his lighthearted commentary and offered plaintiff money and instructed plaintiff to say that the violent R-word was consensual and that plaintiff was an S-worker. Plaintiff became enraged and yelled at defendant Diddy that he R-worded her, that her R-word was not consensual and she was not a S-worker, and she refused to take any money from him and would tell the police that he had R-worded her. Defendant Diddy then told plaintiff no one would ever believe she had been R-worded by him, and if she did tell anyone such, that they would harm her family. Defendant Big Homie CC then showed plaintiff his phone, which looked as if it was the outside of plaintiff's estranged sister's residence, as she could see her sister sitting on the couch and her sister's spouse on the balcony. It looked as if someone was outside the residence streaming the video to defendant Big Homie CC's phone. Plaintiff, while rattled by what she was seeing on defendant Big Homie CC's phone, was still angry about being gang R-worded and was not complying with defendant Diddy's request to take the money being offered to say the R-word was consensual. Defendant Diddy then called defendant Janice in effort to further convince plaintiff not to report her assault. Defendant Janice yelled at plaintiff not to hurt her son. Plaintiff told defendant Janice that her son had violently R-worded plaintiff. Defendant Janice, seemingly unfazed by the statement, then continued her demands with plaintiff to take the money being offered and not report the R-word to law enforcement. Defendant Diddy made further threats that he had gotten off from bigger crimes than this and referred to Tupac again, further antagonizing plaintiff. Defendant Big Homie CC then turned to defendant Diddy and
I'll be honest though, this story does sound like it's right up Diddy's alley though. It sounds like something exactly that he would do.
His weapon on him.
Just due to the multiple lawsuits and stories that Cassie had wrote and along with other people,
asking him to repeat what he said in reference to Tupac. As the two of them were exchanging words, plaintiff went behind defendant Big Homie CC, where he seemingly began to protect plaintiff. Defendant Big Homie CC then advanced to defendant Diddy, questioning him over the comments he made about Tupac. During this commotion, a neighbor directly across the street came outside and peeked into the backyard and asked what all this commotion was about. Defendant Big Homie CC then pointed the gun at the neighbor and instructed him to mind his business and return to his residence. Defendant Big Homie CC then turned the weapon back on defendant Diddy. Plaintiff, not far behind defendant Big Homie CC, tried to grab defendant Big Homie CC's hand that had the gun. The weapon then went off and hit a hill behind defendant Shane's residence. Defendant Diddy then ran up the back stone stairs near the hill in the backyard towards where defendant KK, Shane, and Brandy were. Plaintiff charged towards defendant Diddy, moving the concealed knife from her left hand to her right hand in pursuit of defendant Diddy. Plaintiff then pushed defendant Diddy from behind while on the stone stairs outside, causing him to fall with his back to plaintiff. Plaintiff then raised the knife in a rage from the events that just transpired and with the intent of driving the knife into defendant Diddy's back. When he turned around and began pleading for his life, plaintiff, shocked now to see defendant Diddy acting as a victim, had a moment of clarity and then turned and ran down the outdoor stone staircase back out to the backyard to escape. Defendant Diddy then chased plaintiff down the stairs and attempted to push her, but she was already at the bottom of the stairs and gained her footing and wielded the knife at defendant Diddy, grazing his abdomen. Hearing the commotion, defendant KK and Brandy emerged, and defendant KK then began administering.
So if she was able to successfully make that slash at Diddy's abdomen, then that's evidence in itself that this lawsuit can be very true. If that slash isn't there, then I don't know. But I don't know why she ain't just make it happen right there and then. You get what I'm saying? She had mercy on him. As soon as she started fleeing, Diddy started chasing after her like a monster. But hey, let's continue.
First aid to defendant Diddy for the injuries caused by plaintiff. Plaintiff tried to make a quick dash for the exit, but it was thwarted by another defendant Doe. After a period of time, plaintiff was able to abscond from defendant Doe due to the first aid commotion with defendant Diddy and was able to run down the street. Once plaintiff made it onto the street, she began yelling loudly for someone to call the police. Defendant Doe, who had now caught up with plaintiff, advised plaintiff that he was an undercover cop. To this day, plaintiff is unsure of the truth or falsity of this statement. The same neighbor then again emerged from his residence asking what was transpiring. Just as plaintiff was attempting to answer, gunshots began being fired in plaintiff's direction. Plaintiff fled to a car near where the neighbor was also taking cover and lost sight of defendant Doe. Plaintiff then heard a SUV screeching and speeding leaving the residence. Plaintiff then entered the home of the neighbor, who informed her that he had already called police. Plaintiff informed the neighbor that it was Sean Combs who had R-worded her and shot at them, but the neighbor was unaware who defendant Diddy was. Shortly thereafter, a sheriff from the Contra Costa Sheriff's Department arrived at the neighborhood's home. Plaintiff identified the person who arrived at the neighbor's home posing as a Contra Costa sheriff was defendant Pelletier. Plaintiff told defendant Pelletier, believing he was a sheriff from local police, she had been violently gang R-worded by defendant Diddy and others, and that she did not have her clothes, phone, purse, car keys, or cell phone. Defendant Pelletier, falsely posing as a sheriff, told plaintiff and the neighbor that they had received several noise complaints prior to the neighbor's call and instructed plaintiff to find a way to get home. The sheriff defendant Pelletier did not offer to take plaintiff home, nor did he call for emergency services, including an ambulance, nor any offer to take plaintiff to the hospital, nor any offer to help plaintiff recover her clothes or effects from defendant Shane's residence. The Contra Costa sheriffs have confirmed that a police report was made that night by plaintiff Parham. The Contra Costa sheriffs have refused to release any information related to the complaint on that night in question to any source, despite numerous attempts made via Freedom of Information Act. Plaintiff observed defendant Pelletier hand something to the neighbor, what looked to be an envelope, at the door as defendant Pelletier exited. The neighbor went to a nearby room and quickly returned empty-handed. Plaintiff believes the envelope contained cash. The neighbor offered to let plaintiff sleep on his couch until she could figure out a way to get her possessions and get home, but plaintiff declined, uneasy and unsure about the exchange with police and the neighbor, and only remained at the neighbor's residence for a short period of time once defendant Pelletier, posing as an officer, left. Plaintiff then went back to defendant Shane's residence, where she found the door open and her clothes were readily accessible in the residence. Defendant Shane then emerged as if nothing had transpired and offered for plaintiff to stay at his residence while she slept it off. Plaintiff asked for her purse and keys, but defendant Shane told her she wouldn't leave in her condition, and plaintiff, in a state of shock and disbelief of the events that transpired, stayed at defendant Shane's home while defendant Shane left the home. Later that morning, defendant Shane returned to the residence and
I don't know, does being in a state of shock equal I'm gonna stay in the same exact environment that got me in this place? I don't know what she was thinking with that one. I'm gonna be very honest with you. Bro, get your stuff, call an Uber, go somewhere. Sleep at the neighbor's crib, if anything. But you gonna sleep in the same spot that everything happened? Okay.
woke plaintiff up and finally gave her back her purse, cell phone, and keys, and plaintiff left defendant's residence. In a daze, plaintiff returned home and tried to make sense of what happened to her. On March 26, 2018, plaintiff contacted her primary care doctor and asked for an HIV and STD test in fear of possibly having contracted a disease from her violent R-word. Plaintiff tried to continue her life as she felt she wouldn't be believed, as plaintiff already had told what she believed to the sheriff's department that Diddy R-worded her to no avail. Further, plaintiff was under the impression if she did continue to say defendant Diddy's name in retaliation to her assault, she would not be believed and her family would be in danger. Seemingly mere days, maybe even the day before plaintiff's vicious R-word, defendant Shane had miraculously began driving a new car. Plaintiff believed this was payment by defendant Diddy for setting up plaintiff to be R-worded. Plaintiff went to the hospital where the hospital conducted several tests on plaintiff, including an R kit, ultrasound, and x-rays. Additionally, plaintiff was given IV fluids to stabilize her vitals as she was in severe weakened state from being unable to eat and losing substantial amount of weight since the R-word occurred. While at the hospital, plaintiff told members of her treatment team about her horrific assault, and they then contacted the Walnut Creek police. Walnut Creek police showed up to plaintiff's hospital room and took a statement regarding her assault. Plaintiff only told Walnut Creek police about the assault from defendant Shane and Doe. Plaintiff believes her statement made to the Walnut Creek police while at the hospital was captured by police body cam footage. Plaintiff further believes her statements made on March 23, immediately after the vicious assault, where plaintiff named defendant Diddy directly and by name, may be captured by body cam footage, but upon determining the sheriff was defendant Pelletier, does not believe it was captured as he was a co-conspirator. Plaintiff filed the report to the Oneida Police Department on April 17, 2018, but was too afraid to name defendant Diddy as one of her assailants. During this report, plaintiff provided her clothing to the police from the night of the assault, but they only retained her underwear. To date, the underwear was never returned, and plaintiff believes.
So the cops that the neighbor called never really. I'm about to sneeze. The cops that the neighbor called never even really came. Just a fake cop came that was on Diddy's side. So it seemed like a report was never even really filed. That's what it seems like.
No investigation ever commenced. Plaintiff sought out assistance from therapists in May 2018, one of which tried to have her therapy appointments covered by a victim's compensation fund, which was rejected because plaintiff was told no law enforcement agency had opened an active investigation into any of her many reports of her violent gang R-word. Subsequently thereafter, plaintiff asked police for a copy of a report from the Walnut Creek Police Department. On July 19, 2018, plaintiff was provided a letter from the Walnut Creek Police Department stating that it was unable to furnish this information as it is confidential and not subject to public release, despite plaintiff not being the public and the victim complainant. In March 2024, plaintiff was re-traumatized by all the events surrounding defendant Diddy, including the several civil complaints filed against him, as well as the raid on defendant Diddy's California and Florida residence. Plaintiff called Contra Costa sheriffs again in hopes of renewing her previous complaint and amending it to ensure defendant Diddy's name was included. Plaintiff received no response from the sheriff. Plaintiff in July 2024 then emailed.
Bro, these law officials are getting paid off, like just paid off, and they're just accepting it. Because they're probably also getting the same treatment. They're getting threatened, and then they're also getting, their families getting threatened. And then it's like, all right, we'll just give you some money if you don't do anything or do further investigation on the case. And then they just end up taking it.
The chief of the sheriff's office regarding her complaint, lack of investigation, and how she was treated by the initial responding officer. Plaintiff then later received a call back from a detective, but nothing further. Plaintiff then began seeking legal counsel for her claims, ultimately being referred to undersigned for representation. Undersigned counsel also attempted to get a copy of the 2018 police report from the sheriffs, but was told that they would not provide the report or any other information without a subpoena. Plaintiff John and Jane Doe are mother and son. Plaintiff were taken from their Las Vegas residence by defendant Pelletier as they walked to their vehicle. Defendant Pelletier put a gun to plaintiff John Doe's back and instructed him to get in a black SUV regarding extraditing plaintiff for warrants to California. Plaintiff did not have any warrants nor convictions. Plaintiff demanded to be shown the warrants, and defendant Pelletier refused and threatened to shoot plaintiff if they protested further. In the back of the black SUV was defendant Valdez. Defendant was unknown to plaintiff at the time. Defendant was dressed in dark clothes and instructed plaintiff not to look at him. Plaintiff were then transported to what they believe was defendant Pelletier's residence at Bay St. Las Vegas. Plaintiff were ordered inside and brought into the living room and forced to sit on the couch and were physically restrained. Plaintiff demanded to speak to their attorney, which was refused, ignored, and met with threats of violence. It became obvious to plaintiff that this was not a legal arrest and that Pilater was acting outside of the color of the law. At some point thereafter, plaintiff was ordered to the back of a large black SUV. Defendant Gonzalez was given the keys to plaintiff's vehicle, a SUV, to follow behind the SUV. Defendants Gonzalez and Pilater had a list, which upon information and belief was a list of safe houses which they could allow parties a safe respite undetected. Defendant Pilater appeared to be in charge, and he and defendant Valdez were both giving out orders to the other co-conspirator defendants. Plaintiff overheard repeated conversations in the vehicle while being kidnapped and transported about following protocol made by defendant Pilater to others. Upon information and belief, this protocol was agreed upon codes, including the use of communication apps like WhatsApp or Snapchat, satellite phones, and referring to other co-conspirator defendants by their middle names. It was apparent to plaintiff that this was a professional operation syndicate. Plaintiff were then trafficked from Las Vegas to NV to various locations through California. The first location plaintiff were able to identify was in Danville, California. In the convoy with the SUV plaintiffs were placed in also included plaintiff's SUV that was driven by defendant Gonzalez. Upon information and belief, defendant KK was in another SUV, a part of the convoy. At some point, defendant Gonzalez complained he had trouble keeping up with the convoy of black SUVs because the SUV ran poorly. Plaintiff alleges that the convoy drive was for numerous hours, but the exact time was uncertain as they were unable to keep track of time. The next location plaintiff were taken among the safe houses on their route to an unknown destination was Way, Danville, California. Plaintiff heard some altercation with the owners of the home not wanting to be involved with defendant's scheme. Plaintiff attempted to plead to the owners for help and could not understand why they wouldn't heed plaintiff's cries for help. Plaintiffs heard the owner speak a foreign language which they believe was Farsi. Upon information and belief, this location was approximately 20 miles from the home in Orinda where plaintiff Parham was assaulted. During the transportation of plaintiffs across state lines, they were given water to drink, which plaintiff believed was drugged. Defendant Valdez would provide plaintiff the water, which after drinking, plaintiff would feel slightly euphoric, dizzy, and then sick. Defendant Valdez would demand plaintiff drink the water, but they refused.
At this point, you know what I'm saying? You can't trust no water or drink from anyone in this situation. How did she get herself back in this situation though? I thought she had escaped. And then she reopened the case and then got herself back into this big ordeal or something like that. I'm still waiting for the Jaguar Wright part. That's what I'm waiting for.
And or fake consumption. During the transportation, plaintiffs were forced to listen to a device with music, similar to a device associated with defendants KK's non-profit organization, Music Be Hearts, in order to prevent plaintiff from eavesdropping on defendant's conversation. At certain times, the music stopped playing and plaintiff and John Doe was able to get the earbuds partially out of one ear without defendant noticing, to hear conversations about the plans they had for plaintiff. Plaintiff were taken to another location. Plaintiff were able to keep track of their location by remembering cross streets where they were finally let out of the vehicle for stops. At this location, plaintiff observed an RV arrive at the residence. During this stop is when plaintiff noticed defendant KK was a part of the convoy. At this stop, plaintiff overheard defendant KK being referred to as her code name, believing to be her middle name Natasha, discussing visiting the UC Berkeley campus as defendant seemed very familiar with the area and familiar with the city. Upon information and belief, the location was approximately 7 miles from the home in Oneida where plaintiff were assaulted. Plaintiff were then taken to another location at the Beacon Grand Hotel. Defendant Shane worked at the hotel as a manager. Plaintiff were taken into the hotel through what appeared to be a side entrance by defendant Aldez Pilater and Gonzalez. Defendant Pilater told the co-conspirator defendants he would stay at a different hotel nearby so it wouldn't be linked to him. Once inside the hotel room, plaintiffs were beaten and drugged by defendant Valdez and Gonzalez. Plaintiff pleaded with Valdez and Gonzalez to be released and for mercy. Defendant Valdez and Gonzalez instructed plaintiff to sign paperwork at gunpoint. When plaintiff plaintiff refused, defendant Gonzalez would pistol whip plaintiff on the back of their heads. Defendant Gonzalez eventually gave plaintiff a drink, which caused him to pass out. Plaintiff spent the night at the hotel with defendant Gonzalez and Valdez, taking turns watching them. The next morning, plaintiff was restrained and bound by their hands in front and were placed into a vehicle. Plaintiff then saw defendant Jaguar and Helena. Upon information and belief, defendant Jaguar and Helena were in a small sedan light color white or beige. Plaintiff were then transported to the location of plaintiff's Param's brutal assault on Loma Vista Drive by defendant Jaguar and Helena. Defendant Helena was the driver and defendant Jaguar was the passenger. Defendant Helena warned plaintiff if they tried to escape or run that she would have to shoot them. Defendant Helena also warned plaintiff not to throw up in her vehicle, saying you better not throw up in my car or get sick. Defendant Helena mentioned having two partners as backup who were bounty hunters. Plaintiff were familiar with defendant Helena as she had filed a lawsuit against superstar singer Michael Jackson in 2005 and filed a creditor's claim against the Jackson estate upon his untimely demise in 2009. Plaintiff were familiar with defendant Helena from her previous Michael Jackson lawsuits and had previously met with defendant at her home in West Hollywood to determine the credibility of her claims. Syndicate made conversation with defendant Helena in which she admitted she was the same person who plaintiff had met with previously with defendant Valdez and other individuals. Plaintiff attempted to make conversation with defendant Helena in which she admitted she was the same person who plaintiff had met with previously. Defendant Jaguar, aggravated, stated, "You let them know who you are? That's really great." Plaintiff noticed defendants had large brown bags and envelopes full of cash that was banded. It appeared they were separating the large sums of cash to distribute it as they were placing cash into the envelopes. Defendant Jaguar discussed with defendant Helena how the party started the first black-owned network. Upon information and belief, plaintiff believed that the network to be Revolt TV. Defendant Jaguar and defendant Helena discussed the other co-conspirators but referred to them by their middle names Natasha, Pedro, Lyra, Cornelius, and Larry, shortened for Lawrence. When defendant Jaguar said Cornelius is upset, defendant Helena, who said that defendants Odell and Drewski were her clients and nothing better happened to them, and plaintiff better not say anything about them or she would have plaintiff taken out. Defendant Jaguar then told plaintiff they were being taken to meet John. Plaintiffs now know they were referring to Diddy. When defendants arrived with plaintiff at the Loma Vista location, it appeared that they were waiting and coordinating for others to arrive. A large sedan arrived, and plaintiff were placed in the back with defendant Valdez. Defendant Pilater was driving. Plaintiff then arrived at a short driveway curb. Plaintiff remembers looking for intersecting street signs at this location and found a...
Okay, well, I can tell you this much. Like, if this lawsuit is true, then that also does confirm even more what Jaguar Wright has been saying about Diddy. She's basically experiencing it all firsthand. But let's continue.
Dead-end street off of Loma Vista Drive. Plaintiff John Doe repeated the name of the street to himself, so he remembered and was able to whisper it into Jane Doe's ear to remember the intersecting street name. Plaintiff believed this was the home they would be taken out in and tried to devise a plan for escape. Plaintiff were brought into the house and into the kitchen where they were watched by defendant Gonzalez. Plaintiff repeated their pleas to defendant Gonzalez to be released and for mercy, which he replied, "There's nothing he can do." Plaintiff could hear other people inside the home and tried to listen to understand what was happening, which included a woman's screams. Eventually, plaintiff were led deeper into the home where they encountered more individuals, including defendant Diddy. Plaintiff observed several individuals gathered around a bed while defendant Gonzalez and Valdez stood outer guard. Plaintiff observed defendant Jaguar and Helena enter the residence. Defendant Jaguar told plaintiff, "He wants something you have. If I were you, I'll figure out what it is really fast." The he defendant was referring to is believed to be defendant Diddy. Shortly after defendant Drewski appeared wearing a vest and shorts, he engaged in conversation with plaintiff. Plaintiff tried to appeal to defendant by talking about the music industry, and defendant instructed plaintiff that they should cooperate. Plaintiff describes what they observed during the assaults of plaintiff Parham after this interaction with defendant Drewski. Plaintiff observed plaintiff Parham having an IUD forcefully placed in her privates by defendant KK with the assistance of defendant defendant Brandy. Plaintiff heard defendant KK make a remark about how plaintiff Jane Doe would not need an IUD because of her age. While hearing plaintiff Parham scream in agony during the forced IUD insertion, plaintiff Jane Doe yelled, "Stop hurting her." Plaintiff observed defendant Shane place a pillow over plaintiff Parham's face, suffocating her, and plaintiff Jane Doe yelled for them to stop, or that she would die. Plaintiff Jane Doe believes plaintiff Parham did lose consciousness because she became limp and unresponsive. Defendant Diddy instructed defendant Valdez to shut her up, and defendant Valdez hit plaintiff Jane Doe with the handle of his firearm. Plaintiff John Doe witnessed plaintiff Parham being assaulted by the remote, and when he tried to say something, plaintiff was told to shut up or they would put the remote in him next. Plaintiff John Doe believes he heard defendant Jaguar make remarks, "Put the remote in her. She's going to learn today," and telling plaintiff Parham that she was going to make it worse. Plaintiff believes the remote assault was to punish plaintiff Parham for the IUD failure. Plaintiff heard defendant KK's remarks to defendant Diddy and Drewski that she needed to keep them sufficiently drugged and revealed a bag full of drugs and paraphernalia. Defendant KK appeared to be dispersing doses to defendants, asking them their weights to administer the proper amount. At some point, plaintiff John Doe was taken to the bathroom. While in the bathroom, he believed there may have been other tenants and began to bang on the walls, hoping someone would hear him, but the only person who heard him was defendant Valdez and Gonzalez, who were outside keeping watch. Upon plaintiff John Doe returned, he saw defendant Odell. Plaintiff John Doe took immediate notice of defendant Odell because when he took his clothes off, plaintiff remembers defendant being in great shape, especially in comparison to the bodies of defendant Diddy and Drewski. Plaintiff John Doe overheard defendant Diddy and Odell discussing business and the plan to have plaintiff Parham return to New York with defendant Odell. Plaintiff John Doe could not readily observe where plaintiff Jane Doe was during this time. While during this time where plaintiff Jane Doe was out of the sight, plaintiff Jane Doe was being SA'd by defendant Valdez in another room. Plaintiff John Doe witnessed the R word of plaintiff Parham. Plaintiff Jane Doe witnessed the R word of plaintiff Parham. Plaintiff John Doe witnessed defendant Drewski dose plaintiff in baby oil and then jump and slide across her body. Plaintiff John Doe observed defendant Diddy and Drewski manically and hysterically laughing, which plaintiff...
Now, what type of timing is Drewski on? Is that like this man's signature move or something like that, bro? This is just getting weirder and weirder, bro. This is crazy, and I wanna see where this lawsuit goes. I want to see the validity behind it. I want to see how it's taken to court, and if the things in this lawsuit are true, then, you know, justice should be served at the end of the day. We already know Diddy's already in jail, but let's continue to see what else they have to say.
Attribute to their drug use. Defendant Diddy then attempted to force plaintiff John Doe to also assault plaintiff Parham, and he refused. Defendant Diddy instructed defendant co-conspirator to throw plaintiff John Doe into the wall several times in order to get him to comply with his demands to R-word plaintiff Parham, which he would not comply. Defendant Diddy instructed defendant co-conspirator to yank, grab, and pull at plaintiff's John Doe's private violently in efforts to punish him for not participating in the gang R-word of plaintiff Parham. Plaintiff John Doe remembers defendant Big Homie saying he was going to look for pliers to use to further torture plaintiff. Plaintiff John Doe believes defendant Diddy wanted plaintiff to R-word plaintiff Parham so they can frame him in the event plaintiff Parham reported her assault. In an effort to get DNA from plaintiff John Doe to place on plaintiff Parham, defendant Diddy had one of the defendant's co-conspirators go down on plaintiff to get some DNA from him, but it failed. Plaintiff Jane Doe observed defendant KK return to the room to check on plaintiff Parham and providing her an IV telling her to breathe deeply. Plaintiff John Doe watched plaintiff Parham lose consciousness. At some point, plaintiff Jane Doe returns after defendant Diddy, Shane, Drewski, Odell, KK, and others leave the home and retire to either the backyard or the upstairs patio. Plaintiff were left alone and unattended with an unconscious plaintiff Parham. Plaintiffs were crying after observing the assault upon plaintiff Parham and began to realize this was their next chance to devise a plan for escape. Plaintiff began looking for weapons and exit points to make their escape. Plaintiff could not find any phones or any weapons like knives in the kitchen, as it appeared that all the silverware had been removed from the kitchen. Now, I'm not going to continue to read the lawsuit as we pretty much have read all the allegations. To summarize the whole lawsuit, Ashley Parham claims that she was held against her will by Diddy and his associates after making comments about Diddy possibly being involved in the death of Tupac. She also claims that Drewski and Odell Beckham Jr. joined in on the assault, also claiming that Jaguar Wright, in a later date, helped kidnap her and transport her back to Diddy. If I'm not mistaken, the lawsuit claims this incident happened last year. Now, there are photos of Diddy and Odell hanging out at what appears to be Diddy's residence. While this doesn't prove his guilt or involvement, I am suspicious of everyone who hangs around Diddy. Everyone in the industry knows what kind of man Diddy truly is. Odell has denied the allegations, releasing this statement on Twitter. "Boy, I'll tell you what, this world makes absolutely no sense. I am covered by God. He will prevail. I know who am I, and I know who you are. Keep your head up. That name will be cleared. It's stupid." Drewski seems to have a closer relationship with Diddy, as Drewski seems to have been recruited for Diddy's Revolt network. Drewski even has skits where he is at Diddy's home hanging out. Drewski has also confirmed that he had attended Diddy's parties in the past. Now, Drewski has also denied the allegations, calling it all fabricated, releasing this statement in response. "This allegation is a fabricated lie. I wasn't a public figure in 2018. I was broke, living with my mom without any connections to the entertainment industry at the time of this allegation. So the inclusion of my name is truly outlandish. My heart breaks for actual victims of abuse, but I am fully confident that the evidence will expose this falsehood and the individuals who are maliciously trying to game the legal system to peddle false narratives." I looked into Drewski and my research indicates he was already a rising creator in 2018. He had viral online content at the time. While there isn't any proof that he was already buddies with Diddy, I wouldn't be surprised if he was. It could be possible that Drewski is an industry plant and had already been in those circles. Who knows? Maybe this incident was some sort of initiation. I wouldn't be surprised if these allegations made against him are true, as he admitted to partying with Diddy in the past. Now, Jaguar Wright being included in this did catch me off guard. Jaguar has been outspoken about Diddy. She's made a whole career out of it. So seeing her name as a possible accomplice was rather surprising. Then again, it wasn't that surprising as she had already admitted to doing some shady things in the past. I personally stopped believing Jaguar and started seeing her as a double agent months ago when I made this video on her. See, Jaguar Wright was pretending to be a Christian and a part of the truth-seeking movement, but then she admitted that she's a witch and that she used her son's ashes in a ritual.
The people that I bang with in my family, definitely music. You know, my respect for God goes beyond all of that, which was why it was hard leaving Richard Nichols. I'm a Christian. He's an atheist. How can I let him make life choices for me? I'm a Christian.
Ex-Jaguar why she recorded herself throwing her dead son's ashes on people.
Well, I guess it's time to answer that last question as well. I do not practice the same form of spirituality that everyone else does. I follow Yeshua. I serve the almighty living God. And I acknowledge all sides of God. God the Father, God the Mother, and God the Son. I don't believe in doves and I don't believe in lambs. I believe in the source that sources this world, the energy that sources us all. And I believe in the true words that were written down on tablet. Now, a lot of people read a book that they know is the Bible, and there's a lot of truth in it, just like Kim Porter's memoir. And it's also shrouded in a bunch of lies, just like Kim Porter's memoir. I think the problem with religion is that we spend too much time trying to figure out who got it right, rather than realizing we all got it right, and it's just the different lies that they put in it that make them different. I study the old ways. I study the ways that came before Yeshua was born. The things that I practice and the things that I know go back tens of thousands of years, not just a few hundred. The truth is I've studied every religion, and it led me to the truth. And the truth is there is no religion. There's just God, and there is us. Now, there are some people that practice the things that I practice. And the beautiful thing about practicing the old ways is that it works. Whether you use it for good or whether you use it for evil. You think what I did with my son's ashes was so terrible? You want to know what I find most funny about that question? Nobody bothers to ask me what was happening before it or after it. People only want to know what happened in that short minute and a half. But there was a whole day of events that happened leading up to that. And even before that camera footage was taken, there was an hour of things that happened that nobody bothered to ask about. Nobody bothered to ask about what happened after that either. So, what I will say is, whatever I choose to do with my DNA, I'll do with my DNA. As per my right as a law-abiding American citizen, I have the right to practice whatever religion I choose. Do I not, gentlemen?
Yeah, you do. You got that right. You surely do.
I also don't have to explain my religious practices to anybody, as per the Constitution and the amendments. But if you really want to know what I did with those ashes, you should probably ask me everything that happened before and happened after, because all of it was witchcraft. Because all of it was witchcraft.
Alright, family, so we're gonna leave it right there. Comment down below what y'all think about this lawsuit in itself. Do y'all think it's true? Do you think it's not? Or do you think it's just, there's just a possibility? Do you think Jaguar Wright was involved? She has mentioned multiple times that, she has been in the industry. She's done some shady things, like the truth is said. So comment down below what you guys think. I do read the comments. I appreciate your comments. Smash the like button, subscribe, turn on post notifications. I'm going to catch you guys in the next one.